Madam President, today is Equal Pay Day. And I mentioned that to someone earlier, and it's what's that mean? So what that means is that an American woman working full-time in America today, I'm talking about the average American woman working full-time, had to work all last year and up to today of this year to earn what the average male in that same job made last year up to December 31st. That's what Equal Pay Day is. Just think about that. Same job classification. Man gets paid up to December 31st. Woman has to work all that year and up till today to get the same pay. It's shocking that in 2014 that is still happening in America. Shocking. Because we passed the Equal Pay Act in 1963. Well, in 1963, a woman made about 60 cents on the dollar for what a man made. Same job. Today it's 77 cents. So I guess you say we made some headway. 63, 73, 83, 40 years. We've gone from 60 cents to 77 cents. Well, what we found out through our committee hearings, committee I'm privileged to chair, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, that a lot of employers in this country are not really abiding by some of the provisions of the Fair Pay Act, the Equal Pay Act. And so I compliment Senator Mikulski on our committee, also the chair of the Full Appropriations Committee, for her leadership in bringing this bill, the Paycheck Fairness Act, to the Senate. At that time, when we passed it in 1963, 25 million female workers, as I said, earned about 60 cents on the dollar. So now it's 77 cents. Well, again, the deficit and what it means for a lifetime of earning, again, is kind of startling. Over the course of a 40-year career, women on average earn more than $450,000 less than men. And get this, women with a college degree or more face an even wider gap of more than $700,000 over a lifetime compared with men with the same education, higher education. So again, the consequences are enormous, impacting not just women, but their families as well. And not just impacting women during their working lives, but keep this in mind. When you're making that much less, then you're getting that much less in your retirement, in your Social Security, or maybe your 401k or a defined benefit, whatever it might be. So women get whacked twice during their working life, and then when they retire, because they have made substantially less than men. So again, I congratulate Senator Mikulski for bringing this bill forward and for her indefatigable work on this issue. It just is time to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. It's simple, common sense legislation to make sure that we have procedures and processes in place to make sure that the Equal Pay Act passed in 1963 has some teeth, that employers can't just skirt around it anymore, and that there will be avenues for women to take to make sure that they're not discriminated against in terms of pay. Now, for one thing, right now, it can be a violation of company policy, for example, in a company if a woman wants to talk to another person about what their salaries are. The company can say, you can't do that. Well, this bill says, yes, you can. You can talk to someone else. They don't have to tell you. We don't force anybody to tell you what their salary is. But you can make inquiries. You can discuss it with your fellow employees. And the employer cannot take retaliation against you for doing that. That's a huge step forward, by the way. A little bit of transparency, a little bit of knowledge that a woman could have to understand whether or not she's being discriminated against in her employment. And of course, we have reams and reams of information and information and data about employers retaliating against women for discussing salary information. So this bill is long overdue, and we need to pass it. Madam President, I also want to ask unanimous consent that Paul Osadebe and Emily Schwartz, interns with the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, be granted floor privileges for duration of today's session.
Without objection.
I thank the presiding officer. But, Madam President, we can't just stop there on the Paycheck Fairness Bill. We have to then pass it, and then we have to do a few other things. We have to tackle the more subtle discrimination that occurs when we systematically undervalue the work traditionally done by women. The fact is, millions of female-dominated jobs that are equivalent in skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions to similar jobs dominated by men, pay significantly less than male equivalent type jobs. For example, why is a housekeeper worth less than a janitor? Think about it. 84% of the maids that clean your rooms when you go to hotels and stuff, 84% are female. 75% of janitors are male. While the jobs are equivalent in terms of skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions, the median weekly earnings for a maid are $399. For a janitor, it's $484. Truck drivers, a job that is 96% male, have a median weekly earnings of $730. In contrast, a child care worker, a job that is 93% female, has median weekly earnings of $390. Why do we value someone who moves products more than we value someone who looks after the safety and well-being of our children? I'm not saying that truck drivers are overpaid. It's just saying that jobs that we consider, quote, women's work are often underpaid, even though they're equivalent in skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. Quite frankly, some of the jobs that women do, like nurses, require a lot more physical effort than being a truck driver. Maybe in the old days, truck drivers had to be strong to muscle those trucks around. Now everybody's got power steering and power brakes and everything else. You know, you don't have to be some big heavyweight giant to drive trucks anymore. But to be a nurse and you're rolling people over that weigh 250 pounds and you're doing things, that can take quite a bit of effort. So why are nurses so much paid less than truck drivers? Well, that's why in every Congress since 1996, I have introduced the Fair Pay Act, which would require employers to provide equal pay for equivalent jobs. My counterpart in the House has been Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton. Together, we have introduced it in every Congress since 1996. It would require employers to provide equal pay for jobs that are equivalent in skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions, but which are dominated by employees of a different gender, race, or national origin. Now, people might say, that maybe that's a stretch. Well, Madam President, in 1983, the Republican legislature of my state of Iowa, working with a Republican governor, passed a bill stipulating that the state of Iowa could not discriminate in compensation between predominantly male and female jobs. They had to pay equivalent wages. So they hired Arthur Young and Company. They evaluated 800 job classifications in state government. And finally, in April 1984, 10,751 employees should be given a pay increase. And since 1984, in Iowa, we've had that equivalency. Minnesota, our neighbor to the north and the presiding officer's neighbor to the east, they went even a step further. Minnesota at that time passed a bill providing for equivalent pay not only in state jobs, but clear down to the local level in Minnesota. So it can be done. Can be done. For the women in this country who are currently being paid less, not because of their skills, not because of their education, working conditions, or responsibility, simply because they're in what we call female-dominated jobs. This bill would make sure they receive their real worth, make a huge difference for them and the families who rely on their wages. What my bill would do, basically, would require employers to publicly disclose their job categories and their pay scales. They wouldn't have to publish what every employee was making. They'd have to say, here are our job classifications, and here are the pay scales in those job classifications. So it would give women information about what their male colleagues are earning, or anyone that's in that pay scale, so they could negotiate a better deal for themselves in the workplace. Right now, women who believe they're a victim of pay discrimination must file a lawsuit, endure a drawn-out legal discovery process to find out whether they make less than the man working beside them. But with statistics readily available, this could be avoided. The number of lawsuits would go down if employees could see up front whether they're being treated fairly. Several years ago, our committee had Lilly Ledbetter come and testify before our committee. We had provided her with a copy of the Fair Pay Act that I've been introducing since 1996, and she took a look at it with this description, and I asked her that if the Fair Pay Act had been law when she was hired, would it have obviated her wage discrimination case? She said that with the information about pay scales that the bill provides, she would have known from the beginning that she was a victim of discrimination and could have tried to address the problem sooner, before it caused a lifelong drop in her earnings and before she had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to make things right. So again, the Paycheck Fairness Act, it's time to get that done, put some teeth in it. But it's time to take the next step, because the biggest gap right now between what women make and what men make is a number of women that are in what we have traditionally known as women's jobs: housekeepers, maids, nurses, nurse assistants, on and on. So it's time to take the step that my state, Minnesota, and there are other states, I just mentioned those two because I'm familiar with them, have taken to address this problem of equivalency. Now, the next thing we need to do to make sure that the equal pay day is not today, but is December 31st, like what men get paid, is to raise the minimum wage. And hopefully we will be voting on that soon, to raise the minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10. And again, the majority of low-wage workers are women because of the trends I just mentioned. Jobs primarily held by women are undervalued and underpaid. And most of the minimum wage workers are women. So again, we have to raise that, and we need to raise tipped wages. Tipped wages right now are $2.13 an hour, hasn't been changed since 1991. Now, who are most of the tipped workers? Women. Women. And many of them are providing income for their families, for their children.